Hey everyone, me Kevin here. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what White House advisors Deborah Birx and Tony Fauci just said about COVID progression after Thanksgiving. Let's go ahead and get an update from them, see some of their recommendations. I'm also going to be adding some graphics that I found that are really cool, so I'm excited to show you those, so make sure to stick around for those. Let's go ahead and start with Deborah here. Just keep in mind, Deborah is going to start by talking in reference to, look, before the second wave that came in May, we had 25,000 cases at a time, and then we had the second wave. Well, right now, we're going into this potential next wave with 180,000 cases at a time. And we're not even getting everybody who's actually catching COVID getting tested, right? So, in other words, both of them are a little nervous right now about what's to come. Let's listen to what they say, though, about lockdown recommendations and even basically us imposing lockdowns on ourselves.
Now we are deeply worried about what could happen post-Thanksgiving because the number of cases, 25,000 versus 180,000 a day. That's why we are deeply concerned. And as you described, it looked like things were starting to improve in our northern plains states. And now with Thanksgiving, we're worried that all of that will be reversed.
Now, I want to make a quick note here, and I'm going to put this ball up every time I need to pause. I cut this to keep the video really short, or simplified at least. Deborah Birx is probably in a room alone. Usually the way this works is broadcasters will set up a broadcasting camera at advisors' places, like whether that's Fauci or Deborah Birx or, Dr. Scott Gottlieb. And basically they just go into a room and they talk to this camera that's remotely controlled by some, broadcast manager somewhere else. In other words, she's probably in a room totally alone. She's wearing a mask to send a signal. We should all be wearing masks. We should definitely be masking. This is where I quickly want to bring up this graphic that I found. I think it's really awesome. And take a look at this. I will link this down below. But basically, here's how this works. You can go into this, function here, and you could play with some of the things. Like, okay, let's say we're in a 431 square foot room, or like a family room, about the size of a 2-car garage. The windows are closed. You've got 10 people in the room. One person has COVID. The odds of you catching COVID, if everybody is talking normally, without this person like sneezing on you or coughing on you, just through aerosolized COVID particles, is 19%. That means they believe that 2 people will catch COVID in this room. Now, let's say everybody was singing. So we're going to change this to the yelling button. Boom. Everybody in this room is going to catch COVID. So this little tool is kind of fun to play with because watch this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to change ventilation. And I'm going to change this to from no ventilation to adding like a HEPA filter. Something that's going to circulate the air but also run it through a filter that would catch the coronavirus. When I add ventilation, I drop the odds with everyone singing for 4.5 hours. I dropped the odds of getting COVID from 100% to 59%. Let's go ahead and take out ventilation, and now let's go ahead and put on what Deborah Birx is wearing, which is a surgical mask. I throw that on, I drop the odds to 43%, with everybody yelling in a room for 4.5 hours with somebody who's got COVID. I mean, not everybody's gonna be yelling for 4.5 hours, but we're making a point here because the point is, if we go over to this FFP2 mask, AKA, if you're ever concerned or if you're high risk and you're definitely trying to avoid catching COVID, you got to get yourself something that's the equivalent of an FFP2 mask or a KN95, an N95, or P100. Check these out on eBay. They're available. If we pop these on, everybody in the room, watch what happens. Click. Everybody could literally be singing for 4.5 hours, and there's only a 2% chance of actually catching COVID. That's kind of crazy. This tool was really cool. I found this, and I will link it down below. By the way, if you're ever looking for a really good inside air purifier, something with a really sick HEPA filter, they're a little pricey, but once you get one of these, I mean, you're sucking pollution out of your house. You're really cleaning the air inside of your house. Consider going to metkevin.com/ air. And you'll see the ventilation system that I use in my house. Lauren has severe asthma, so we actually have 2 of these machines in the house to try to keep our indoor air quality as solid as possible. And they've even got a UV light system that kills or sort of disables viruses as well, since I guess viruses aren't really alive.
We know people may have made mistakes over the Thanksgiving time period. So if you're young and you gathered, you need to be tested about 5 to 10 days later, but you need to assume that you're infected and not go near your grandparents and aunts and others without a mask. We're really asking families to even mask indoors if they chose to gather during Thanksgiving and others went across the country or even into the next state. And if you're over 65 or you have comorbidities and you gathered at Thanksgiving, if you develop any symptoms, you need to be tested immediately, because we know that our therapeutics work best, both our antivirals and our monoclonal antibodies work best very early in disease. So we're really asking governors and mayors to make testing more available so we can prevent people having to be hospitalized. But obviously, we're deeply worried. We're over 90,000 inpatients right now. If we have a surge 2 weeks on top of that, even when we're starting to see some improvement, I appreciate that you have Mayor from Detroit on. They're really, all these mayors are working to decrease their number of cases and getting to a plateau, and now we could have a 4th surge.
Okay, this is actually really interesting. This is the White House actually backing off the idea of saying, we need mayors to do lockdowns. Notice there's nothing here saying, oh, mayors should lock down. The White House is saying we should do lockdowns. We should have more restrictions. No. First of all, that's super not what the Republican Party is for right now. That's obvious. We know that. And that's not taking political sides. It's just making a very clear statement here. But what Deborah Birx here is saying is we need individuals to basically assume they are exposed if they traveled. She said that. That's a big statement. If you traveled, assume you're exposed. Wear a mask indoors if you traveled. Stay away from people with comorbidities. Really interesting. And that graphic we saw, I mean, that N95 mask, boom, crushed that transmission possibility. She also says, look, if there are symptoms, test early. She's really putting the onus on people. So rather than the government saying, you must, she's going, you should. It's kind of an interesting shift that we haven't really seen, and I think part of it is coming because the White House is actually quite fearful of this surge on a surge. The fact that 90,000 people are hospitalized right now, and we're expecting this to balloon in the next few weeks. So now we had our focus on what the individual should do. The question's now going to be, what should the government do? Let's see what she says.
Are you asking, I know you've been traveling the country, are you asking governors to close the bars to keep schools open? Is that your advice?
First, what we do know works is mask mandates, mask requirements. In states that did those, or mayors or counties that did that, we can see a really significant difference in not only cases, but hospitalizations and fatalities. And so starting with mask mandates and remasking requirements, absolutely key, followed by, if you have high case numbers and you're seeing increased hospitalizations, the first thing you should do is close spaces where people cannot wear masks. And we know where that is. That's bars and indoor restaurants. Reduce capacity. If needed, you may have to even close them. We have seen that works. That's what Arizona did, and that's where Arizona got control. Arizona is in the position that they need to be really considering this again because their case numbers are up where they were in the summer.
When will you begin briefing the Biden administration?
I hope on Monday.
Okay, that's actually a big statement there. So she, obviously working for the Trump administration right now, says she hopes that she will be able to start briefing Biden as soon as tomorrow, but also says, look, in terms of governmental restrictions, the biggest thing that can be done, mask mandates and shutting down places where it's not possible to wear masks, aka restaurants and bars. Let's go ahead and see what else she has to say.
Masking, physical distancing, avoiding bars, avoiding crowded indoor areas. If those restrictions don't exist in your state, you need to take it upon yourself to be restrictive. You need
This is going back to that original shift. The White House is taking the onus from government and putting it onto the person. She's saying, look, we need mask mandates. We need certain places to close down. But if that doesn't happen, it's your obligation to prevent the spread of COVID. It's a very different technique. We haven't seen this before, at least in my opinion, as bluntly as we're seeing it now from the White House.
need to not go to these places. You need to protect your family now. And really watch, if your family traveled, you have to assume that you were exposed and you became infected, and you really need to get tested in the next week, and you need to avoid anyone in your family with comorbidities or over 65, because now is the moment to, what happened would have happened. I mean, we know that people got together in Thanksgiving. The moment now is to protect those from having secondary and tertiary transmissions within the family.
Wow, okay, she's really just saying here, like, look, Thanksgiving happened. 3 million people traveled in 3 days. It happened. Let's try to mitigate all of the other, crazy outbreak that we're going to see or could potentially see if people didn't mitigate the spread.
So what we expect, unfortunately,
Fauci now,
as we go for the next couple of weeks into December, that we might see a surge superimposed upon that surge that we're already in. And, and when I give that message, I don't want to frighten people, except to say it is not too late at all for us to do something about this, because as we travel back, to be careful when we go back to where we are, to just continue to do the things that we've been talking about. An important issue, Chuck, is that we know when you mitigate with masks, with distance, with not having crowds or congregate settings, that those states that have done that, you could actually see that the inflection of their curve starts to do this. So we know we can do something about it, particularly now as we get into the colder season and as we approach the Christmas holidays.
Yeah, interesting. This another example here where Fauci is also taking that same position of, hey, it's on us to protect ourselves, to mask up. But not only that, I want to show really quickly, look at this. As I was recording this, just within the same minute here, take a look at this, what was just tweeted by Senator Joe Manchin. If you have traveled over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend or hosted people from outside your household, consider getting a free COVID-19 test this week to help stop the spread. We are literally seeing all walks of government take this new shift on, hey, government restrictions aren't working. Let's try to convince the people to minimize spreading it. It's a very interesting shift that we're seeing, and hopefully it works.
So I think we're going to be faced with another situation. We're going to have to make decisions as a nation, state, city, and family, that we're in a very difficult time, and we're going to have to do the kinds of restrictions of things we would like to have done, particularly in this holiday season, because we're entering into what's really a precarious situation, because we're in the middle of a steep slope. When I tell what people need to do, we say it over and over again. We know it works, but also that there is, as I mentioned to you before, Chuck, there is light at the end of the tunnel, because we will really be seeing vaccines soon. We likely, almost certainly, are going to be vaccinating a portion of the individuals in the first priority before the end of December. And then as we get into January and February and March, more and more. So if we can hang together as a country and do these kinds of things to blunt these surges until we get a substantial proportion of the population vaccinated, we can get through this.
See, again, that shift. Can we get together as a country and stop it? Totally different tune.
We do have within our capability to be able to blunt that by doing the simple things that we talk about short of locking down, so we don't precipitate the necessity of locking down.
Oh, that's a big statement there. That's basically saying, hey, look, if we do these things and we all get together as a country, well, then we won't have to lock down. We won't precipitate or bring about the necessity or require lockdowns. Interesting. Okay, they're really putting the onus on us, which maybe that's what we kind of need right now. Rather than making it a political statement to wear masks or not wear masks, it becomes instead something that, hey, let's just all work together to try to prevent this. Now, something I want to show off really quick that I think is really cool is take a look at this graphic I'm putting up on screen here. This is a graphic by the New York Times, and I know not everybody loves the New York Times, but take a look at this. This is like one of those augmented reality things. And what this does is it says, aerosols emitted by humans will vary in size. The coronavirus, it gives basically the size. And what they're doing is they're giving you an example here of how the coronavirus sort of virus itself can crash into the filters of an N95 mask. Those are the masks we talked about earlier. So watch, I'm going to tap here, and it's going to kind of demonstrate how far this ball has to go through to actually get through a mask. They actually say if this ball were human-sized, the human would have to get through 1.7 miles to scale of all of these different lines, so to speak, to be able to make it through the other side. You know, there's even this electromagneticness or electrostaticness that can sometimes pull the coronavirus into these strands. And so they're really talking up the N95 mask here. So we'll tap to start again. You can kind of see that ball just sort of hit the line there. As I rotate here, we can get a feeling for what's going on. They do say that the N95 is much more efficient, though, than cloth masks. So really, if you can get your hands on one of the sort of ventless KN95s or N95 respirators, that's probably the best thing to do to protect yourself and others. Something to keep in mind. Anyway, hopefully you found this video helpful on, well, what's going on with the coronavirus and some of the latest put together in a little bit of a concise format here. If you liked it, consider sharing it. Thanks so much for watching. Check out those links down below for the graphics. I'll link both of these graphics down below so you can play with both of them if you want. You can kind of experiment with them. I also have an air purifier that I recommend linked down below as well. You can go to metkevin.com/air to see it. And folks, we'll see you in the next video.